Morning, this is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Friday, February 21st, 2025. It's just after 10:15. We're continuing our tour of the FY26 budget, and we're delighted to have with us the Public Utility Commission. And I think you have not been before this particular group of committee members before. We have a few that are not here, but we have 6 new members this year. So let's go around and introduce ourselves, and then we can have you do the
Good
same.
morning. I'm Dave Iacoboni from Morrisville, and I represent the Lamoille, Washington district. Greetings.
Good morning and welcome. John Kosenska from Burke, and I represent the Essex Caledonia district.
I'm Mike Nigro, I represent Bennington and Pell.
Tom Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington Chittenden district.
Good morning, Jim Harrison from the town of Chittenden, also represent Mendon, Killington, and Pittsfield. Thank you.
And I'm Robin Shy from Middlebury.
Tiff Blumley from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel from Underhill and Jericho.
Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford.
And then we also have Mike Moricki, who's from Putney and Dummerston, and Lynn Dickinson from St. Albans Town. That's us, and also about Bar.
Great, thanks. So Ed McNamara, Chair of the Public Utility Commission.
Karen Hutchinson, Business Manager, Public Utility Commission. And I'm Ann Bishop. I'm the Public Utility Commission's Operations Director.
Welcome.
All right. So we had sent over thank you. So you all have that. So just start walking through, and please interrupt with any questions as we go through. And I also note we're scheduled for an hour. Obviously, take whatever time. You can move me along quicker if you want, whatever. So quick overview of who we are. We're a quasi-judicial independent regulatory body. We've been around in various forms since 1855. We started off regulating railroads, and then over 100-something years, evolved to start regulating electric utilities, natural gas, various forms of telecommunication companies. And I can't do 2 notes at the same time. So what we're really structured for, and every state has some version of a public utility commission. When you have a monopoly utility, and you don't have competition, you need some sort of mechanism or function to ensure that customers are paying reasonable rates. So the regulatory function basically steps in place of competition to ensure that captive customers of a utility are not being taken advantage of economically. So we'll also say there's a federal statutory overlay on all our work. We regulate electric, natural gas, telecommunications in some form, some water companies. It's primarily electric and natural gas that we regulate. There's Federal Power Act, Federal Gas Act that limits to some degree our regulation. And then on the telecommunications side, we actually do not have as much regulatory authority on telecommunications and cable. From the federal perspective, they're much more focused on competition. They're ensuring adequate competition. They don't want a lot of state regulation getting in the way of competition. And water companies, we used to do a lot more, regulate a lot more water companies, but only private water companies. So we don't regulate municipal water systems. And there's something called fire districts that are essentially cooperatives on the water level. We don't regulate fire districts, and so a lot of water companies we used to regulate decided to become fire districts. So we did not take it personally. We understood.
Maybe you had enough other work to do.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
All right. In terms of who we are currently, so there's about 28 of us. 5 classified folks, and the rest are exempt. 25 exempt includes the 3 commissioners. So me as chair, and then 2 additional commissioners were appointed for 6-year terms, approved by the Senate. And let's see, looking at FY24 numbers, we received a lot of sort of new cases, petitions, cases, but so over 3,000. A lot of those are actually registrations. And a couple of years ago, we moved to a system where people can essentially submit an online form. And this is primarily net metering. So the small rooftop solar projects, we get a lot of those. And so we streamline the process so people can submit an online form. Unless there's an objection, it just sort of goes through. So even though we have over 3,000 cases a year, a lot of those are actually registration, and that was a lot of upfront work and a decent amount of IT costs as well to set up the system and maintain that system. We routinely, sorry, EPUC is, I note is on the slide here. EPUC is our online case management system that went into effect within the last 10 years.
2017, we started.
Great, thank you. And it used to be that all our filings, everything was kept track of, old file cabinets, and the list of cases were on a yellow pad in somebody's desk drawer, literally. And we have moved to anybody can actually go online, find a case that they're interested in, and see all the filings associated with it. So it's also great from not just from the perspective of people who actually practice in front of us, but from a public records perspective. If anybody wants to understand what Green Mountain Power said in a rate case and then what the Department of Public Service said in response, it's easy to find that. So EPUC has been a fantastic tool for us. Oh, and my apologies, I'm going to back up 1 second. I discussed who we are, Department of Public Service. I'm not sure if they've been in yet. We get confused with Department of Public Service a lot. They are the state's energy planning office. They also do telecommunications planning, and they're the public advocate. So they represent the public interest in proceedings in front of the Public Utility Commission. So completely separate. They're part of the administration. We're independent. But just want to make sure when you hear, if I say DPS, Department of Public Service, it really is a separate entity entirely.
It's not the same as the Department of Public Safety.
That's correct.
Your DPS, I know. I thought it was the Public Service Department, the PSD, to differentiate it from the PSD.
PSD, so I've been around long enough that it was only called DPS for the longest time, because in statute it's Department of Public Service, or it's actually Department of Public Service in statute.
Right.
Somebody had the good idea to differentiate that, and because apparently I'm stubborn, I still think of it as DPS because I started when they were DPS.
Many acronyms. Okay, continue.
All right, sorry. So looking at slide 3, the FY26 budget summary. So we made a point of including this pie chart here on the left. We're 100% special funded. We don't receive any general funds whatsoever. So our funding comes primarily from, it's called a gross receipts tax on the regulated utilities, the utilities that we actively regulate. So electric, cable, telecommunications, natural gas. And then to a much smaller degree, that I'll get into later, there's application fees. So if Green Mountain Power, for example, is going to propose a solar project, because they pay the gross receipts tax, they don't pay any additional fee when they submit an application to build a solar project or a transmission line. However, what's called merchant generators, and that includes independent companies that come in, just build solar projects and then sell the power to Green Mountain Power, or for net metering, those folks pay an application fee because there's no other funding source that we have that covers the work that we do to review those applications. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2019 is when we first put into place application fees. So you'll see in the numbers, FY26 is technically a decrease compared to FY25, and that's actually a history that you need to back up about 2 years. FY25 2024, I believe, is when we received general funds, probably the first time in a long time, in decades, that we received general funds, if ever. And that was for us to develop the clean heat standard. We had to design the program, design the rules, and provide a report to the legislature. So that work carried over through 2 fiscal years, and so we're finishing up. We finished the clean heat report, submitted that, but FY25 included some of the general funds that we had to carry over from FY24 to finish up the work. So even though our FY26 budget is technically lower, if you discount clean heat standard and the general funds that came in, our budget has actually increased. Double checking.
Okay, yeah, that, yeah.
So also, we're not really we're not like Agency of Natural Resources where we own all sorts of parks and have capital maintenance programs, things like that. We've got an office with some copiers, a bunch of laptops, but almost all of our costs are related to salaries. About 87% of the commission's budget represents salaries. I will note that health insurance premiums, and I'm sure you've heard from everybody else, increased significantly. Internal service funds, basically what we're paying to BGS, ADS, other folks, that takes up about 6% of our budget. Another important component for folks to be aware of, our FY26 revenues do not cover the full costs of the commission. So we've had, for about the last 15 years, a reserve fund. And that reserve fund, we're able to draw down to compensate for having a gap in our revenues.
What's the balance in your reserve fund? Your reserve fund.
Approximately 4.2 million.
Okay. And how does that compare to last year?
Last year, we used about 150,000 of our reserve fund in FY24. We're anticipating that we're going to need, I believe it's 810,000 in FY25, which includes funding some of the remainder of the clean heat costs that we didn't receive any additional money for in FY25.
And then FY26, you're also going to be?
Another
It was
34,000, I believe is the figure.
And so has the reserve fund, you're spending it down, but is there money going into the reserve fund?
No, there's not.
So it's a one-way street right now.
At the moment, it is. And I'll get into a little bit later. We are asking to increase application fees. And also we are going to take a look at long-term stability, long-term revenue stability. And this would apply for both us and Department of Public Service, which is largely funded by gross receipts tax. And I'll just flag right now. So the gross receipts tax can vary. It's basically it's a tax on the overall revenues of the utility. And the revenues can vary significantly from year to year. If you think of Vermont gas, for example, a particularly cold year, the revenues are going to be a lot higher than a very mild year. And same with electric as well. So the revenues vary, and therefore what we receive through the gross receipts tax varies. On the electric side in particular, we have state policy that's pushing for more electric vehicles, more heat pumps. That is expected to fairly significantly increase the overall load and therefore the revenues for the electric utilities. That would then also increase the gross receipts tax. We've been hearing about this for years, and we're not quite seeing that the increase in gross receipts tax making up for the budget or the revenue shortfall. And so one of the things that we intend on looking at is doing a deeper dive in when what are reasonable estimates for when gross receipts tax revenues are going to actually start significantly increasing to the point where we're not going to need to draw down on the reserve fund?
So they'll do some projections based on
Exactly.
assumptions are.
Yeah.
You probably just answered my question, but, so the clean heat standard wasn't fully funded, which required you to pull some money out of your reserve fund.
That's correct.
And given, so, and now you're doing an analysis to see whether or not your receipts through time are gonna be able to keep you stable.
That's correct.
Not require that you continue to draw down that.
I don't think the clean heat work is the sole reason that you're drawing
No, no,
from,
no.
not to mislead people. We gave them money to do that specifically, but their costs are,
The cost,
the costs to run the PUC are coming in at a higher rate than what the revenues are coming in at.
yes, and just to be clear, there was for FY 25, we were short some money in part because of clean heat standard, but not entirely. And so even in FY 26 with clean heat not included, any work included, any budget included, we're still running a shortfall.
Need to borrow 835,000 from the reserves. It doesn't have anything to do with the clean heat standard.
No, but how much of it was the unfunded part of the clean heat standard?
I'm not sure. I don't believe.
Approximately, we're expecting to use about approximately $400,000 out of our reserve in FY 25 because of the clean heat standard.
Okay.
We received a general fund appropriation, a one-time general fund appropriation in FY 24. We did not spend all of it in FY 24. We were allowed to carry over the unspent portion to FY 25, but that was not sufficient that original appropriation was not sufficient to cover the year's worth of costs.
Right.
Yeah.
So about 400,000 you're gonna eat in terms of what's come from the clean heat standard. Out of your reserve.
From the initial general fund appropriations associated with clean heat standard, yes,
But not for FY 26.
not for FY 26. Yep.
Okay, when you have people come before you, you have dockets.
Yep.
Those, do they are extra funds that are created by going into a docket? Or is that just the gross receipts tax and the application fees pay for that work? Because that's most of what you do, from what I gather.
It is most of what we do, and gross receipts tax pays for. Let me just back up a little bit. Prior to 2019, gross receipts tax paid for 100% of our work. There were no application fees. And also I would say that prior to 2005 even, almost all of our work was a result of petitions from electric utilities, water companies that were paying the gross receipts tax. Somewhere around 2005, a little bit after, is when we started seeing these merchant solar projects. So independent power producers coming in, proposing, and it has been primarily solar projects. They're not paying the gross receipts tax. And so that became an issue of we're spending resources to review those projects, but without any associated revenue. So 2019, we put in application fees in place. And the application fees, first time we'd ever done them, were meant to cover the full costs, or at least a decent portion of our costs associated with reviewing those independent power producer petitions. The application fees are not covering the full costs of review.
Okay, so the docket, it's not like you go and you pay a court fee. You pay the gross receipts tax that takes care of you regulated. Then you have these new applications for these other new entities that didn't exist before.
Exactly.
Okay, so the question becomes, you had a reserve fund that you had to develop from excess revenue somewhere.
Yep.
And now you're drawing it down.
That's correct.
So the question becomes, should you increase what you charge? I mean, if these it seems to me if the grocery receipts tax was supposed to take care of all the regulated people 100%, and up until 2019 they did that, these applications for these new things, you're either understaffed or you're trying to add staff and you just can't cover your costs. I mean, those application fees should go up,
We agree.
you know, so you break even. I mean, all you need to do is break even.
Yes, yeah, we're not looking to make a profit, yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the application fees that I'm gonna talk about later, it still wouldn't cover the full cost. It's the full cost of the review. And sorry, the application fees, when we look at it, is covering only a portion of staff time. We also have EPUC, the case management system. We're not assigning a portion of our review of this independent power producers. We're not trying to set the application fee at the moment to cover the costs of, for example, our offices, our laptops.
Yeah, the
The
normal
case
stuff
management
you would have to.
We would be doing
normal expenses. So
anyway.
why wouldn't you just raise it to cover all those costs? Get it, you know, get yourself back to zero.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can use the reserve fund, but it's gonna go away at some point soon.
Yes, it will over,
And you'll have to raise the fees,
yep,
the application fee,
yes.
part of the cost of doing business.
Completely agree. And then there's also the question of, is it politically palatable to raise fees on certain companies? And we're trying.
Regulated utilities. I mean,
So, all right, we need, we need to move on from.
okay.
I mean, there's a lot of things where we have fee issues. There's no question about it. And this is yet another
We
one.
do.
Right?
So my question is, I mean, we've seen other organizations come in with reserve funds and trying to maintain a certain minimum amount in the reserve fund there to maintain operations. Do you have a number? Do you have some threshold that you'd like to know, not go below it, reserve fund, in order to make sure that things don't go south one way or the other?
Yeah, part of the issue that we have and part of what's really helpful for us with the reserve fund, because we are general funded, we get the gross receipts tax the end of the year. So we're sort of carrying the costs all throughout the year. Ideally, we're not, ideally, the reserve fund is buffering that. I'm not entirely sure what that number is. We've talked internally, but I don't think that I can't tell you right now the number is X. We have in mind of it would start getting more dangerous if we got below X, but we are not there yet in terms of providing a number.
So did I just hear you say you get the gross receipts tax at the end of the year?
That's correct.
Is there a possibility of getting it more frequently?
So the gross receipts tax is paid once a year. It's due April 15th. It's collected by the Public Service Department. And then the Public Service Department on the last day of the fiscal year transfers the commission's share of the monies it collected into our account.
So you have some idea maybe in April? This
Yes.
is sort of like tax. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Thank you. Continue.
No. All right, moving on to slide 4, commission's workload and performance, and we're starting to go through sort of the requests that the committee's had. Yeah, sorry, we did not put slide numbers on here. It's commission's workload and performance at the very top. So how much did we do? More than 3,000 new cases in FY24. More than 14,000 filings made in those cases collectively. 75 hearings and workshops that our staff held, and over 1,500 orders and certificates of public good were issued. So the timeframes we worked, the auditor's office had a fairly recent report on this as well. We looked at other courts, other similar bodies to what a reasonable expectation is for issuing orders for completing our cases. Generally, we actually are meeting all of those. I think there might be like 1% we're short here and there. And I will just say also that these are not widgets we're issuing. When you put in, for example, 100 acre solar project, the metric should not be how fast can you process it. It is what is the impact on the community and everybody surrounding you as well. So the metrics are very useful. I don't think that they should be 100% of the story though, because we're supposed to issue a certificate of public good saying this project actually benefits Vermont, not we did this as fast as possible.
Right, so something like information requests a time.
Yes,
speed.
absolutely.
And what's the established timeframe for that? Because that seems like it's straightforward.
It's statutory timeframe.
I don't know what that is.
It's 3 days if it's a relatively straightforward, and then I think it's 9 days.
Okay,
if it's
so-
more complicated. Yep,
Okay.
great. Slide 5, major cases in 2024. This is just to give you an example of what we do. 2024, most large portion of our time was clean heat standard, but we also have rate increase cases that come in, Green Mountain Power, Vermont Gas. Green Mountain Power also proposed what's called a zero outage initiative with major storms. They want to reduce the storms. They want to get ahead of capital costs and therefore either underground, strengthen some of their sub-transmission lines and distribution lines. We look at electric vehicle charging rates as well, the rates that the utilities offer, not the sort of independent.
Charge point.
Exactly. We don't do charge point, just the utilities, electric vehicle charging rates. And then, so 17 electric utilities overall, Green Mountain Power is about 80% of customers, but we do also receive a fair amount of rate increases as well from the municipal and cooperative, the smaller electric utilities. There was a telecommunications acquisition related case. And then we have a fair amount of rules and need to update those periodically as well. Next slide, known cases for 2025. We have a couple of reports due to you folks. One on thermal energy exchange networks and basically geothermal. Another on basically low-income rates and how we can stabilize low-income rates, especially given the move to electrification as people switch off from heating fuels, for example, to heat pumps or gasoline to electricity. It's going to become more important and more interesting as well. So electric vehicle charging rates, we get trickles of those in occasionally. Integrated resource plans, our utilities, our electric and natural gas utilities are required to look out over a 10 to 20 year period and say, here's how they're going to provide least cost service to their customers. So we review those plans. We just had a public hearing last night for Green Mountain Power's integrated resource plan. Sorry, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's a couple 20 megawatt solar projects. Those are the 100-acre projects that we have. And then the Supreme Court overturned us recently and told us to review portions of the Addison natural gas pipeline.
Oh, okay, so I'm familiar. So they overturned the,
A
I should know that, but I.
specific provision on our review process.
Okay. When did that happen?
Supreme Court decision, I believe, was the summer, and there's been a lot of procedural back and forth. The first scheduling conference was just yesterday afternoon. So.
Yeah, can you tell me what the City of Burlington Electric Department negative electric EEU fund balance is? What is the EEU?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Electric efficiency utility, or sorry, energy efficiency utility. And that is Efficiency Vermont is the statewide energy efficiency utility, but City of Burlington Electric Department sort of was carved out of Efficiency Vermont, so it provides its own efficiency services. And the revenue is raised for Efficiency Vermont and for Burlington Electric through energy efficiency charge. It's a line item on everyone's bill. Burlington Electric Department had a negative fund balance, and we're trying to understand how it got to that point. So that's the investigation.
So they spent more than they collected, sort of.
There's some issues associated with the accounting that we're looking at. And I'm not suggesting,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm not,
that's why you're investigating.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Ongoing potential cases, I've already mentioned rate increases. Renewable energy standard. There was just a law change last year, so we need to update our rules. Energy efficiency utilities, we have regular cases that show up as a result of those. Alternative regulation is simply a different way of regulating Vermont Gas and Green Mountain Power's electric rates. It's a different way of rate regulation. And then smaller electric generation facilities, so more than 2,300 net metering petitions in FY24. Well, I did say earlier, we don't have a lot of regulatory sort of control in the telecom space. We are responsible for siting telecommunications towers. And that can vary significantly over the years. I think last year, FY24 might have been only 65, but telecom towers that we saw. And those are either new towers or modifications to existing towers. Sometimes they're not even towers, they're just panels inside a church steeple. It's about 100 of those a year on average, what we see though. And then also just to note, we have no control over our work, or we have some control, but not complete control. Somebody can just show up and say, we are proposing to build, 60-mile transmission line or a 20 megawatts solar project. We don't control the timing associated with when people file those petitions. So we just have to respond and try to manage as best we can. And then, of course, there's things like what happens if there's a tariff on imports from Canada. We're going to have to, while we are not actively investigating something like that, we would see the results show up through rate increases, other things, and would be additional work. And then almost every year we have a new report for you folks to read. All right, slide 8, Act 18. This is the clean heat standard. So we've already talked about this a little bit. We're directed to develop a rule and a report. So we submitted that, have not heard anything at all since January 15th. And we're highlighting this in large part because it's a great example of when we have this external factor come in, when we're told to do a significant amount of work, especially in this area where we did not really have much regulatory authority or any even understanding of the propane distributors, fuel distributors. It was a lot of work done in 18 months. And even though there was general fund money appropriated for staffing, it still required a lot of more senior people in the organization to jump in, work on it, disrupted a lot of things sort of throughout, slowed down some other things elsewhere. So that's just a very concrete example. We mentioned this a little bit already, funding for clean heat standard. Essentially, we had general fund appropriation. We're able in FY24 that carried over through FY25. For today, though, what's most relevant, our funding for FY26, we have 3 clean heat standard related positions that were appropriated for us, 2 permanent, 1 limited service. We are not proposing to fund those positions because we have no funding.
Okay, I see a question.
Hi, my turn?
Yes, go for it, Jim.
Thank you. If the legislature does not act on the proposed rules for the clean heat standard, will you still incur any ongoing costs with whether it's the registration system or anything else that might happen?
So the commission just sent a letter to Senate Natural and House Energy, I think it was last night, specifically on this issue. Short answer is the statute would require work that would require some funding. But honestly, it's a rabbit hole I'd suggest that we pass over for today, and I'd
Okay.
suggest the Energy Committee, if you're interested in that aspect, I think the Energy Committees, the relevant committees are probably the better location, respectfully.
Okay, thank you. And then as I'm looking for the funding, the legislature initially appropriated 825,000, if I'm reading this right. You've spent through January, essentially all of that plus a few dollars. And then I'm looking at an additional of approximately 395,000 for the rest of this fiscal year. And where does the funding for that come from?
From our reserve fund. So we had to draw down the reserves for that.
So if you're done, why is this reimbursement for expenses already incurred? This
This-
395?
The 395 is for FY 25.
Right, but your report is in,
Report is in.
and so there's theory, if we do nothing in the legislature, you don't have any more work to do with that, because that was the end, just turning it.
That's
So
correct.
what's the 395 for? Is that work that's already happened that you have?
That's already happened.
That's what I'm trying to get, okay.
Am I getting
And
that?
salaries for those 3 positions.
Does that include through the end of
Three
FY?
positions that aren't filled? The
Sorry.
the 3 positions that aren't filled?
The 3 positions, 2 of those positions are still filled. The 395 includes in part the work that's already been done, and in part the fact that those positions are still on our books and funded. We had in FY 25 put in funding for those positions through the end of FY 25. In other words, we did not know when we put forward our FY 25 what was going to happen, so we kept those positions funded.
So are people still in those positions?
Yes,
And if they aren't doing work on the clean heat standard, what's happening?
there's some personnel issues that we will discuss.
Right, let's continue.
Great. So with clean heat standard, nothing happening. So with those positions vacant for FY 26, the commission's employees will return to the level that we've been at for about the last 20 years. So slide 10, FY 24 actual compared to budget. So I skipped over this one. I was prepping. So essentially, and can you jump in here?
Sure.
Sorry.
Essentially, the main point is that our FY 26 budget is showing a decrease of about 9.26% below our FY 25 budget. That is solely the result of backing out and not funding anything related to the clean heat standard in FY 26. And that decrease would have been higher, except for the increases in salaries and benefits and internal service funds that are related to our traditional usual work. And you'll see at near the bottom of the page, our benefit costs increased $200,000.
Right.
And internal service funds increased about 14,000.
You're on the same pay scale and all of that, the rest of the state employees are, even though you're.
I mean, there is a Public Utility Commission exempt pay plan, but it's generally consistent.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So FY 26 funding sources, again, no general fund. We estimate that gross receipts tax will raise about $4 million. That's about roughly 95% of the revenues that we expect. And then the application fees would be about 3.7%, so $160,000. And we bill back certain costs associated with. This is primarily to develop transcripts for cases, things like that. We bill back those costs. And then the remainder, the $824,000 from the reserve fund. So that's how we're covering our budget. So we've talked a little bit already about the budget challenges that we have. Application fee revenues we did discuss. Next slide is what our proposal is there. I do want to say, though, that the staff time, it's about 36% of our time is spent on applications on these independent power producers, applications that are not funded through gross receipts tax. And as you note on the previous slide, only 3.7% of our revenues actually come from those applications that take about a third of our time. So we have done a lot of work, especially on the net metering registration, to reduce the review cost, to make it as simple as possible, while still ensuring that projects meet the public good criterion that we have. But review is still a review. So next slide, proposed application fee increases. And this is sort of the cost causer pays approach of these independent power producers are causing costs. Currently, they're being subsidized through gross receipts tax and the reserve. So we're proposing to address the inequity by increasing the application fees. We have statutory authority, 30 VSA 248C, to impose these application fees, but they're set in statute. So net metering registration, the current fees are $100. We've proposed doubling that to $200. The next one, modifications net metering registration. This is the biggest jump. $25 currently, it would increase to $200. Part of this is not having done application fees previously, up until 2019. Now we're looking back and seeing, okay, is the fee actually commensurate with the level of work? Modifications sometimes actually take more time than new registrations, just things get more convoluted. So we'd propose to increase from 25 to 200. And that's primarily the smaller scale net metering, sort of the rooftop things. Larger projects, the ones out in the field, they currently pay $5 a kilowatt, increase that to $8. And any modifications, again, because modifications can be fairly complex, increase from 100 to 400.
So did you say that the actual dollar amounts are in statute?
That's correct.
So we would have to write legislation to increase the fees.
That's correct.
Has the governor weighed in on that?
The governor's office is not supportive.
I know they haven't been supportive of any fees, so I just wondered if it,
Yep.
so they are not, okay.
I wanted to just make one additional point related to this. The statute provides that the Public Utility Commission only receives 40%
Oh,
of the
thank you.
amount of the fees. The remaining 60% funds the work of the Public Service Department in their work in reviewing these same applications. So these dollar amounts, the commission only gets 40% of what is
And then 60% goes to,
Public Service Department.
Department.
okay,
Thank you for that.
write that down.
And so when you look at, for example, the modifications to the small systems, the commission gets $10.
Okay. Okay, so that would raise your revenue to 345,000
That's correct.
estimate based on that.
And it would not cover all of the costs. It helps out, and it still, just want to be really clear, this is not a panacea. We do not, even with an application fee increase, we still have longer term budget issues, and we'd still need to draw down on reserves. Which brings us to, I'm actually just going to jump right to slide 15, sustainable funding study. This I talked about a little bit earlier. We did something similar in 2018, I believe, 2018, 2019, when we looked at gross receipts tax, what portion of our work is actually funded by gross receipts tax, what portion is unfunded. That's what led to the application fee. So what we're going to look at is every state has a PUC. Most states have a PSD equivalent as well. We're going to look at the funding sources and funding formulas for other states. And I'm not proposing this. This is just an example. State of Maine, for example, sets its budget, and then it has its own authority to adjust the gross receipts tax to meet that. So there's no statutory requirement. Obviously, the Maine legislature can jump in and say, we don't like that. But the Maine legislature, I believe, does not really have the direct control over the budget. Again, I'm not actually proposing that, simply saying that there's different ways of funding. So we're looking at different ways of funding, and also, when do we expect to see the electrification truly happen? When is there going to be enough electric vehicles that the gross receipts tax is going to produce the revenues necessary to keep us sort of,
Right.
yeah. Sorry, I'm recognizing that we've gone a little bit over time. In terms of last set of questions, last set of responses to the questions that you had asked for everyone to address. We're not really proposing any changes to delivery of service. Obviously, depending on what the legislature does with clean heat standard, that can be a significant change. We've looked at trying to reduce costs as much as possible, since staff costs are about 87%. It's pretty difficult, but we're finding like little margins here and there. We have reached out to BGS to explore reducing office space. We're just talking this morning about with Green Mountain Care Board now in the same building, maybe they can share our hearing room, like those kind of things, like what's ways to be more efficient. Let's see, and we're not proposing any new initiatives for FY26. And last, in terms of federal funding, we don't receive any direct federal funding at all. We're unlike most others. We have had a full-time energy innovation fellow sponsored by U.S. Department of Energy. He actually just finished up yesterday. So, and we don't expect to have anybody in the near future.
So you're at the moment okay with all of those things. Great.
Yeah. So I'll stop there. Recognize we're over.
Thanks. Well, this has been very interesting, and yeah, now we have the rest of the details. And John, this is yours, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sure you've been spending some time up in the energy and digital perspective. We'll be getting more presentations from them as well. Thank you. Thanks for all you're doing. And we appreciate it. And it's been really interesting to learn about what you're up to.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the
Very
time.
much. Take care. Okay, I think we'll just go right into VSAT. Welcome. Education.
And do I need to bring my PowerPoint up, or can I just talk?
I think we have copies of your testimony. So we should introduce ourselves, because we have a bunch of new people, and then you can introduce yourselves and go.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dave Iacoboni from Morrisville, and I represent the Lamoille, Washington district.
Good to see you again.
Yes.
Good morning. Good to see you both again. John Kosenska from Burke and representative from Essex Caledonian District.
I'm Mike Nigro. I represent Bennington and Powell.
Tom Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington Chittenden District.
Yeah.
Good morning, Jim Harrison from Chittenden, representing Killington, Mendon, and Pittsfield as well.
And I'm Robin Scheid from Newbury, and next to me is Tip Bloomley from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford.
Mike Nowicki from the Wyndham 4 District. That's Putney Village.
Lynn Dickinson, I represent St. Albans Town.
Good to
Good
see
to see you.
you. Good to be seen. My name is Scott Giles. I'm the president and CEO of the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, and I'm accompanied by Patrick Leduc, our vice president and chief operating officer. So thank you very much. We've kind of provided a fairly robust deck. It's not my intention to go through all of that. Many of you are familiar with our programs, and as you know, we are a very data and outcomes driven organization. And John reminded me when we met with him that the committee is always interested in data to support the programs and decisions that you've supported. And we have provided those in accompanying slides. So my intention is to do a very brief kind of recap of last year, a brief overview for those who are not familiar with our programs, and then jump right into our budget, and then treat the additional slides as material that we can turn to if members of the committee have have particular questions, if that works for you. I'll open up by saying this has been an exceptional year within education period, but in higher education. And I'm reflecting on last year, not just the exceptional year that we're experiencing this year right now with all the uncertainty at the federal level. Two observations I'll make. Some of you that have been living in the higher education space, I know Lynn and others are familiar with this, but what we thought was going to be a normal year last year started off with the Department of Education completely fumbling the launch of the core financial aid system that every student in the country relies on as their first gateway, for financial aid. And as a result of that, we really had to divert a significant portion of our time and resources to helping students kind of get back on track. Because we knew that the students that were most vulnerable were those students that lacked the parental support to be willing to sit on a call center line for 2.5 hours, waiting for the possibility that somebody would answer your question regarding whether or not your file had gone through. And I'm proud to say that our team has, probably outperformed almost every other state in the nation. We went into May and we were down roughly 7,000 student applications, which is devastating from a workforce perspective, but particularly devastating for our institutions. And in that period between June and September, we captured almost all of them. And it was a tribute to what I would describe as kind of unprecedented collaboration, both within the higher education community, but also with our partners in the K-12 community and with our community partners, because this was really a team effort. And if I were to try and encapsulate, kind of our approach to work, it's really about building teams within the community to serve Vermont students. The programs that you all have supported, I just want to highlight a couple. 802 Opportunity, which is the program that this committee helped launch during the pandemic that allows any student currently coming from a household earning $75,000 or less to attend CCV tuition and fee free, has been transformative both for students and for CCV. And as I know Joyce has probably been in to share this, but to put things in perspective, this program really did three things. During a period when nationwide community college enrollment dropped by 30%, CCV saw enrollment increases. I'll talk a little bit about who those students were. But even more importantly, from our perspective, we saw something happen sooner than we were expecting, which is increase in retention, graduation rates, and in transfer to additional four-year programs, particularly from low-income students that were not receiving the wraparound services that some of our programs normally, would provide. So it was really exceptional. And then with your support, we expanded the workforce programs that we offer. And I'm just going to highlight the Trades Forgivable Loan Program. This is, I think of it as a scholarship with a work requirement. We will pay for an individual who's interested in pursuing the education or training needed to enter into the trades if they commit to work in Vermont for 1 year for each year of financial support that we have provided them. This program is now part of our base, and it has proven to be really exceptionally transformative in a whole variety of places. We launched 2 years ago a teacher program that was modeled after this. We support a nursing program which is funded with global commitment dollars, which is why we're not highlighting it at this moment. And also 2 years ago, we launched a mental health counselor program, all based on the same model, and that is that we will provide tuition support in exchange for a commitment to work in Vermont as a licensed professional for each year of support that we have received. And these programs have been kind of really exceptional. So for those of you who are only familiar with part of ESAC, we often experience that people know us based on the program that that they have encountered. I'm going to do just a brief rundown and then jump right into the budget. So we were created to be the one-stop shop for career and education, finance, and counseling. We partner closely with the Department of Labor, who are really close and important partners with us. We administer the Vermont 529 plan, which some people think of as the college savings plan, and that is what most people use it for. But a change in federal law allows you to use that also for registered apprenticeships, which is a powerful and important new tool for us. We provide career and education counseling to nearly 6,000 students across the state. These counseling programs are supported almost entirely with federal funds, and then with some resources, matching resources that VSAC is able to provide through our loan revenue. We provide financial aid and forums nights, both personally and in virtually every high school in the state. We administer the state grant program, which is the largest of the programs that you support. 802 Opportunity, I've mentioned. Interest-free workforce incentive programs. We just talked about several of them, though not all of them. And in addition, we administer about 140 private scholarship programs for donors around the state who are taking advantage of our financial aid knowledge, our ability to assess need. But just as importantly, they're taking advantage of our ability to braid all of the financial aid programs that we administer, public and private, together. And it is that ability to braid all of this aid together that allows us to come to the committee with what I would describe as very cost-effective and efficient program requests. And 802 Opportunity being one of the most recent examples of that. And then last, we do provide a state supplemental student loan program. This is a program that is designed to meet the gap between what a student can borrow in the federal student loan program and the cost of attendance at a particularly a Vermont institution, but a Vermonter can go anywhere, and a non-Vermonter can borrow from us if they are attending a Vermont school. It's kind of part of the support that we provide. We use tax-exempt financing for that, which means that the amount of interest that we can retain is capped at 2% on any given loan. And that 2% can be used for the administration of all of our programs. So it has allowed us, even though we have and continue to ask for permission to be able to draw a portion of our appropriation for administration, thus far we've been able to use the loan revenues so that 100% of the dollars that you provide to us are actually going into the hands of students.
Scott, have you had any of your grant programs frozen?
I am spending almost as much time in DC these days as I do here in the State House. At this point, the answer is no. And, but timing, I say this facetiously, is everything. All three of our career and education outreach grants are actually up for renewal this year. We just submitted our largest one, which is a 7-year, $4.5 million a year Gear Up grant to the department on February, well, the due date was February 3rd.
The week before.
We did it the week before because we weren't taking any chances. And we're working with the governor, the delegation, and our friends on the Hill to watch those closely.
What are the grants for? What are the programs?
Well, they are for career and education counseling. So they are the way that we are able to put counselors in nearly every middle school and high school in the state.
Yeah.
And also we have, I'm trying to think how many EOC counselors. 8 EOC counselors who live around the state who provide the same support to adults. So these, yeah. So I appreciate that question because this is this is obviously top of mind for us. We're in
Sure it is.
a period when there's a lot of disruption in our space. And what I will say about these programs that gives me some hope is that there is strong bipartisan support, in Congress for all of them. They're not one party or the other. Kentucky is one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Gear Up program. Mitch McConnell has been a longtime strong supporter of it, though his role has changed. The Republican chairs of both appropriations committees have been strong supporters of these programs, but we are in unprecedented times where procedural norms. I'm a veteran of DC, for better or worse.
Maybe that's helpful.
I worked on the Hill for 15 years, and
yeah, although I imagine it's a little bit different now, but that's great. All right, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for your 3 grant programs.
I will say that those changes that we're describing do make it more important that we continue to receive the authority to have permission to draw funding.
Yeah. The language that's in there now.
Yes, we're not asking for any changes, just the continuation of language that has been there. So let me jump right into the budget request. There are 4 components that I'd like to touch on in as much time as the committee is interested. So Governor Scott has proposed increasing VSAC's base appropriation by 3.6%. This would result in an FY 2026 base of $27,084,946. For those, I know that UVM and the state colleges have testified. We are the financial aid student component of the higher education investment, and we are the smallest of those pools. So though our increase was slightly larger on a percent basis, the dollar amount is substantially less than the others. Importantly, the governor, we requested and the governor supported allowing us to use this increase the income threshold on 802 opportunity to 100,000, which is where we think the resting space should be for the foreseeable future. This would allow us to pick up probably about 70 to 75% of Vermont households, and it would fill a hole that we are seeing for dependent students of families that are earning between $75,000 and $100,000 who don't have the resources in order to be able to kind of cover the costs of CCB. I know that Chancellor Malk was testifying this morning, and she mentioned our next priorities. Based on the really successful experience that we have had with 802 Opportunity, we are proposing the creation of a new scholarship program called Freedom and Unity that would allow students attending Vermont State University coming from families earning incomes of $75,000 or less, the ability to attend their programs tuition and fee free. We are also requesting, and I will say that this request was not included in the governor's budget. So this is
All 3 of these were not.
all 3 of these are not included. I'll make one note about the third one. 2 years ago, this committee with really the leadership of the House Education Committee created a forgivable loan program for teachers. We have one of the biggest teacher shortages in the country. We've had more resignations and retirements. And in our rural communities, we've got a greater number of folks that are in some form of kind of temporary licensing. This program was funded with one-time money that was intended to cover 2 years of that. The program has really taken off. I could share some charts, but this past year, we were unable to fund what would have been the equivalent of $3.9 million in total of.
So you could have actually funded that much if you had the money.
If we had the money, if we had the money last year, we would have funded, it would have been $3.9 million. And to put this in perspective, I need to check the numbers, but
270 students.
270 future nurses are now kind of committed to Vermont through this program. I'm kind of very excited about that. And then the last one is a program that was created, again, really with pandemic dollars. 2 years ago, they were transferred to revenue dollars so that we would have carry forward ability. And this was $1 million at the time that was designated to allow us to try and grow the mental health counselor community. This program is a little bit unique in that in order to become a licensed clinical mental health counselor, you need a graduate degree. So this program is predominantly supporting students that are obtaining the graduate credential they need to become licensed professionals in Vermont. We have now fully expended those funds and are suggesting, given the fact that this is one of the biggest challenges our education system faces, and also one of the largest challenges any of us are encountering within our communities, that funds be obtained for that. One note that I do want to make was that we did have the opportunity to testify before Senate Appropriations, and the question was asked, as you know, the nursing program that we also administer on behalf of the Agency of Health receives global commitment dollars for that. That's grown to about $3.2 million. That's contained in the base of the governor's budget request. Senate Appropriations is asking whether the mental health counselor program actually would fit in global commitment as well. And we've not heard back from them, but I know that's being explored.
So you're talking to Human Services about that? Okay. Wayne?
So around the country, is a graduate degree required for mental health professionals, not all the states?
Yes.
Around the country it is.
Yeah.
Or like you need to get one to be a doctor.
Yeah, there are some variations on that. So for certain addiction support programs do not require a graduate degree, but to become a licensed clinical mental health counselor, be eligible to bill Medicaid, all of those things requires licensure, which requires a master's degree.
How many counselors went through the program using the initial 159?
I have a chart. And I'm gonna.
About 160
Okay,
on slide 13.
seeing numbers of, or some of them.
Yeah, slide 13, we have a chart that has,
Yes.
we're showing both the schools and the total awards.
Yeah. And when somebody's using the funds for out of state, are they expected to come back to Vermont?
They're obligated, yes. If you do not, you sign a contractual obligation. If you do not return, this turns into a loan. And then we begin the process of collecting the dollars.
So we've pretty much tried to do that with most of these loan programs, haven't we, when we started this?
Yes, I think as you may recall, the model for this was the original, a smaller nursing program that's now grown. And our experience had been that somewhere between 85 and 90% of the recipients paid off their obligation through service in Vermont.
That's great. Wayne?
The capacity of do the educational programs in the state provide enough capacity in order to provide for what we need for mental health to the master's degree level?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the challenges and why we have been seeing students that are pursuing those degrees in part out of state. But I know that the Vermont State University has made a real commitment to kind of expanding its capacity there, much as they have with nursing, because this nursing is the other area where we have seen this. And we've seen St. Michael's College in particular, which has a master's degree in psychology, which is a little different program, expanding its capacity, and UVM stepping up as well. If I might, I know I'm just, mindful of time and happy to come back. What we did do, I think at the request of the committee last year was we have a series of charts which shows where language is located. So I'm on page 3 of our three of our presentation. All of these, it really kind of to show you a couple things. We historically received permission to use up to $300,000 of our appropriation for what we call our Aspirations Initiative. This is a program where we partner with a high school that has a pretty significant gap in the college and training going rate between first and second generation students. These programs have been very, very successful. The model is that we go in, work with the school, help them design a program that will be self-sustaining, that meets their local needs. And then at the end of 3 or 4 years, our goal is to go on and work with another group. We have slides in here that show some of these outcomes. We can talk about that, but it's been a powerful tool. And I want to say we are at a time when we think this tool is more important than ever. We are seeing declining college going rates, particularly amongst first generation men and women that are happening nationwide, but even more dramatically in Vermont. And this allows us to essentially pilot some locally designed strategies for making sure that those students are actually going to get the education or training they'll need to be successful members of our workforce.
You know where you're working right now? What school?
We have 4 schools we're working with right now. The most recent is Missisquoi, I believe Harwood, Brattleboro, and Oxbow. Those are the 4 schools. And I can't remember the exact order, but the one that's been there for 4 years will roll off.
Right.
We'll seek applications for a new school that's ready to do the same exploration.
Great. Thanks.
Flexible pathway stipend. This is, for those who aren't familiar with it, this is associated with dual enrollment mainly, but also early college. We learned pretty early on in the launch of the dual enrollment program that free and reduced lunch eligible students could not always afford the textbooks, the travel, or in many cases, they were giving up a meal to participate in dual enrollment. And so really this committee took the leadership in launching what we call it's the dual enrollment stipend. Half of that money comes from the general fund, half comes from the education fund. And it just goes to free and reduced lunch eligible students. It's a small $150 stipend to offset some of the costs and encourage those students, the ones we really want to make sure are participating in these programs.
Right. So you will see committee in the budget, we see 41,250 in the ed fund and the same in 600.
And this is really the same where we think that the funding is adequate. We have on page 4, we have what we call other BSAC administered programs. Here really for you to focus on. These are programs that we are administering largely on behalf of other agencies. The Vermont Nurse Forgivable Loan Program, I think we've discussed. There is a dental hygienist program that we are administering. That's contained within the global commitment base. Teacher Forgivable Loan Program, that is ours, that we've talked about. Psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, this is a relatively new program. We believe that we've got sufficient carry forward funds to be able to fund that fully this year. Similarly, the Office of Engagement, we partner with UVM on grad retention program where, we'll pay a portion of loans. That is their program, so they were probably in talking about that this morning.
Yeah, I don't, do you know how much is expended or how much you're carrying forward of the 1.5 million?
Let me check on that because they would have the numbers.
Okay, and we did not get into that level of detail with them this morning. I would like to know how much you're carrying forward.
Okay, we'll check in with them. And then I did want to mention one of our most important partnerships is with the Vermont Guard. We do administer their programs, for them. And I know that if they've not been in already, they will be in to talk about that program.
And has that been fully expended?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so.
No, I'd be interested to know, and I guess they're coming in maybe this afternoon, I can't remember, but how much we've expended, because I know we've had a few years of that now, and it'd be good to know where we should be basing it on. Yeah.
And I know that they are also seeking to expand the programs that are eligible
Okay,
to utilize that.
great.
those funds. Yeah. And then I've already mentioned page 5, we've just got 2 more programs. And we've mentioned the Vermont Mental Health Professional Forgivable Loan Program. And then Nurse Faculty Forgivable Loan Incentive Program, we've got sufficient carry forward to run that program this year. This actually goes to the Vermont education nursing capacity question. One of the things that I think, learned pretty quickly was that the nursing programs were having a challenge hiring faculty members with the academic credentials they needed in order to be able to expand their nursing programs. This program is a way for us to partner with our Vermont nursing schools to identify those individuals and grow them so that we can expand capacity. So with that, I think at the end of my time, I have lots of things that I would love to say about these programs, but I will take any questions or would be happy to meet either individually or come back as the committee might.
Your biggest ask is the 5.2 for the Freedom and Unity Scholars.
That's correct.
And is that similar to the 802? Just remind me quickly of the parameters of that.
It is, and if I might, you never want to negotiate against yourself. But if I would take you to page 7. When we were creating Into Opportunity in the beginning, just because of the fiscal realities that we were facing, we came up with a number of options in order to allow us to launch that initially as a pilot, prove its success, which the program proved itself many times over. And so I want to share that we have a range of options. So as the committee gains interest in this program, I will say, I really do want to say 2 things about this. The creation of this program will be transformative for Vermont students, particularly those coming from families that need education but are questioning whether they can afford it. But just as importantly, we have all collaboratively together invested a great deal of both resource, but really time and energy in the Vermont State University, because that's such a critical part of our educational infrastructure, but also of our economic infrastructure within the state. What we learned from 802 Opportunity was that it increases enrollment, it increases retention, which is even more important, and it increases graduation rates.
Yeah.
That's important from a student success perspective, but that's also transformative for the institutions that experience it. So we think this could be a very powerful tool for the long term.
So what's the difference between standard and online budgets and all budgets? What are,
Sure. So if you remember, as part of their restructuring, they kind of broke their programs into, I'll say, roughly two buckets. There was the group of programs whose tuition was reduced to a little over $10,000. Those tended to be the, kind of the arts, the humanities, the non-technical programs, things excluding nursing and engineering. And so those programs are less expensive. So it's why there is a smaller dollar amount. We're recommending the $75,000 threshold for income and 5.2 million, and that would cover all of their programs. So that would include nursing, the engineering and tech programs that otherwise would be excluded if you went with the smaller pilot.
we have a nursing program.
We do, which is why we offered up both options, because we are acknowledging that we're supporting roughly 100 nursing students at Vermont State University through the Forgivable Loan Program.
Okay. Thank you. You always have great information and you definitely data driven. One more question, Lynn.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I don't know if you know the details. I know, I don't have all the details, but I do know that if you're taking a standard liberal arts type thing, this is different than certificates or credentials. What you get mostly in CCV is the technical stuff, you have more standard liberal arts or a couple of moving into it, the associate's degrees. The allied health, the engineering, the radiology, and some of those kinds of related things, they have an extra surcharge on their tuition. And those are often the ones that are in the most demand, the technical engineering, all of the allied health. And I don't know if there's something else in there, but they add a bit more to the tuition, but that is one of those are the areas that people are looking the most aggressively toward filling. Those are the people we don't have enough of them. Then you can have your regular, liberal arts type school.
And if you did the lower amount just for the more expensive ones.
Mhm.
We'll work on it. We're not going to solve it now, but it's really helpful to
The
know.
only reason that I put this chart in is we believe we are asking for the 5.2 million. But we acknowledge with experience that budget constraints being what they are, the most important message I want to leave with you is that we believe that this is really critically important, and that we would work with you to design a program that fit the budget box that we had to operate in.
Okay. We appreciate the options. Thank you for all the work you do. You're making a real big difference in a lot of people's lives. So we appreciate that.
We couldn't do any of this without the support that you all have provided. So thank you.
Team effort.
It's a breath of fresh air to come here. I don't enjoy my trips to DC quite as much most of the time.
Fingers crossed on your grants too.
Thank you.
Oh, here,
Thank
let me
you.
make you feel at home. It's like, no.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go right into our last group before lunch. And we have the Department of Financial Regulation who have, I think, are all here now. And whoever is going to be speaking, come on up to the table and we can add more chairs as needed. There's some more over there, so. I think some of you were in for budget adjustment. Right, so we won't do the introductions again.
Another busy day.
It's Friday. Right? Okay.
It was very busy. We have your board and we have till 12:15 to. Okay, so if you would introduce yourselves for the record and take it away, please.
Sandy Bigglestone, current acting commissioner of the Department of Financial Regulation and also deputy commissioner of the Captive Insurance Division. Pleased to be here today. Thank you for having us.
David Cameron, I'm the Administrative Services Director for the Department of Financial Regulation.
Welcome.
Thank you. And also we have our deputies who are over Zoom, and in case there are questions specific to their individual divisions, and also Emily Brown, Deputy Commissioner of the Insurance Division in person.
Welcome to all of you. Thanks.
Presentation popping up
Yeah.
shortly. And I guess,
Yeah, we can keep it pretty high level. We also have copies, so while you're getting that set up, why don't we just talk from the pages?
Sure, okay.
Got it here.
So if you turn to slide 2, this is the structure of the Department of Financial Regulation. And there's some just highlights there on DFR's mission and overview, which is a reminder that we protect the financial welfare of Vermont consumers, but we also facilitate strong, stable, and competitive financial markets within Vermont. And those are the entities that we regulate within the DFR. And it's made up of the Commissioner's Office, which is the Business Office, the General Counsel's Office, the Director of Policy and Communications. And then the Commissioner's Office and Administration oversees the 4 divisions: banking, insurance, captive insurance, and securities. And each of those divisions are led by a deputy commissioner. I did not introduce Deputy Commissioner Aaron Ferentz, who's on Zoom. He is the banking deputy, and Amanda Smith with the Securities Division, Deputy Commissioner Smith. And if you turn to slide 3, you'll see that this is a comparison of FY25 and FY26 and the makeup of our positions within the DFR, and there are no new positions for FY26. So we're remaining stable there. And if you turn to slide 4, this kind of gives you some highlights of this year's budgeting process. And we've got, obviously, the governor's recommended budget. All of DFR is 100% special funded. So all of our activities and the revenue that we bring in.
You give us money, so.
We give you,
Appreciate
we give you all the money except for what we need to keep to run our
Yes.
division and operations. Thank you. So you'll see some of that on the next slides. But what I want to highlight here is, and I do have a slide for our employee engagement, but our employees, all 110 of them, are engaged. They're experienced, they're credentialed, and we work very hard at employee satisfaction. And these are good state employee jobs in the financial services sector. So we need that expertise to regulate the companies. We have national recognition for the strength of our insurance and captive insurance divisions. We are accredited, and there's a slide on there, but we work very hard at, meeting the standard, not only nationally, but within Vermont, for having high standards in our regulatory activities. And that does prove to create stability in the entities that we regulate. No new initiatives or positions proposed, as I mentioned before. So kind of flat. Saying no new initiatives is a little tricky for me. It sounds like, status quo, boring. But that is not the case within DFR. At the bottom, we have a link for you to the programmatic performance measures budget. The acronym is PPMB, and that is intended to supplement the budget across state government. And it was published with that link noted here in December, and it creates more transparency and accountability and performance management and also continuous improvement. So even though I said there's no new initiatives, we are constantly measuring the activities within our programs that we are engaged with, and then trying to measure and use those results for improving in how we do things and in becoming more efficient in what we do as well. So constant improvement, I'd say. So there is a $1.4 million increase over FY25, which you'll see in the detail, and about 90% of that is salaries and benefits. And also the remaining is the internal services fund and rent that we pay. The overall budget breakout, 83% salaries and benefits. Again, we need the expertise within DFR to regulate the entities and their complexities and emerging trends. 7.5% is consulting services for the review of our regulated entities, oftentimes, especially, and these are billed back primarily to the regulated entities. Oftentimes, we need to hire outside specialists in terms of examination support, actuarial. We do not have an actuary on staff. And so we retain contracted services for those. And then 9.5% operating, including travel. We often travel to national meetings and appear at conferences in our industry sectors, sharing our expertise and sitting on speaking panels. So that is important, I think, for DFR and shows the strength of our regulation, modeling good regulation, I should say. We are moving into a smaller consolidated space within City Center here in Montpelier. And so, it's the same location, but has, will have some impact, I think, in future budgets, hopefully savings. And BGS is currently negotiating that lease, which runs out June 30th of this year. So we are on, this is a slide 5 is our engagement survey results. And in the categories of, alignment, balance, communication, growth, peers, satisfaction, supervisor. This is an employee engagement survey across all state government in the different agencies and departments. And as you can see, DFR scores higher than the average state department and in really all of the categories. So we think that we'd like to continue with that and support having good resources within, but also making our employees feel rewarded for the work that they do in their jobs. So just a quick mention on that, unless there's questions. Okay, moving on to slide 6. This is our meat and potatoes of what we bring to the general fund. There are 3 revenue streams primarily for DFR. Mostly for securities, it's mutual fund fees that go directly to the general fund. And then for insurance, captive insurance, and then there's a bank franchise fee. Insurance and captive insurance bring in premium taxes that go to the general fund. Again, everything is special funded. And then anything left over at the end of the fiscal year goes back to the general fund.
Which we greatly appreciate.
We do too. This next slide is the insurance division and their profile and some of the highlights. Again, DFR has a mission, but each division also has a mission. And the insurance division is charged with overseeing companies and individuals who participate in the insurance marketplace, ensuring access to affordable insurance products from financially secure companies. And I'll emphasize that too, because having affordable insurance, but also making sure that there are insurance companies that want to be here and are financially stable is important to us. So our regulatory activities are intended to bring that to Vermont.
This is your homeowners and your car insurance and your health insurance and all of those things that people think about. And also for businesses as well.
Yes, so these are insurance companies here, domestics who are here that have jobs, and they run their operations here in Vermont.
A question, Tom.
Yeah, excuse me, so talking about insurance companies that want to be here, forgetting the federal crisis, can we talk a little bit about the climate crisis where we've seen around the country where private insurance companies are pulling out because the costs, whether it's due to flooding or fire, we feel like those of us, especially in towns that have been hit hard enough, that federal flood insurance is, while not completely a scam, is very difficult to maintain. It's very expensive. We've seen in other states where regular homeowner insurance is now incredibly expensive because of this. Do you have, I don't know, I hope I'm using the word quick update on what the status or what you've heard about other, any of these insurance companies as it pertains to Vermont? Because when we talk about affordability, we already know flood insurance can match your mortgage, just like your child care or just like any other, your college loans. And the potential, at least intellectually, is that it's untenable.
Yeah, I think you described it well. Insurance companies are becoming more disciplined in their underwriting and looking to obviously protect their financial status and their financial wherewithal. We are members of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, so we attend meetings 3 times a year. There are calls in between those meetings, and it is a national issue that we're all kind of watching. In Vermont, consumers, both businesses and individuals, are seeing increases in their premiums, especially for property, and flood, as you mentioned, is very, very difficult. It's a challenging marketplace, and it's something that we are monitoring and aware of. I don't know if Deputy Commissioner Brown wants to elaborate on anything.
Yeah, so I think as far as the national picture, you mentioned, I think states that come to mind, Emily Brown, Deputy Commissioner of Insurance. So states that come to mind right now, they're having really challenging issues with their homeowners insurance market, especially our Florida and California. California faced devastating wildfires. I think when you look at insurance regulation, it's a state by state system. So each state has regulatory authority over their markets, and that includes the policies that are sold to the residents of the state, as well as the rates that are charged, the premiums. So while we've seen in California, those costs of those disasters are largely being borne by the policyholders of that state, there is definitely a pooling of that risk, not necessarily at the policy level, but then at the reinsurance level. There's insurance companies that essentially reinsure all the risk of insurers that operate nationally and regionally. And it's there that you're seeing a lot of the risk being transferred, and that cost is then shared, among policyholders, not just in California, but really nationally. And as Commissioner Biddlestone mentioned, the market becomes challenging because you have insurers who then are taking a closer look at the risk that they're taking on, make sure that They know what risk it is, they know how much it can cost. But I think in Vermont, while we've seen flooding, and a lot of those types of risks are covered by the National Flood Insurance Program as well as private flood. Largely, those disasters have not, they've impacted indirectly, but not directly, a lot of the homeowners insurance coverage. Largely because flood is not a covered event under homeowners. So when we have hail or other types of events like an extreme weather event, that can be borne by the homeowners insurance policies, but largely the flooding that I think is the thing that comes to mind when you think about Vermont has not as greatly impacted our homeowners and availability of our property coverage from the state.
No, thank you for that. I noticed that Union Mutual has merged with a Massachusetts company in order to have more pooled resources.
Yes, exactly.
Florida has chosen or has been forced to offer their own statewide insurance, which my minor research has shown that it's incredibly undercapitalized. So it's ensuring with your fingers crossed, essentially, that your street doesn't get damaged. So I'm just,
Yeah, those
I mean,
are,
are these all things that are, because when we do policy work now, not insurance policy, but when we do policy work and we get into conversations about what's affordable and what's coming out of people's wallets, this is kind of a necessary and yet hidden cost, a little bit more hidden than, say, health insurance or health premiums, et cetera, et cetera. So is there like somebody in a cubicle monitoring this, like a storm, where you're like looking at what may be happening that affects us? We don't have a lot of insurance companies in Vermont that have, I imagine they have a solid base, but again, we don't have a lot to lose here.
yeah. Yeah, I think, go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say is we do have a very strong insurance market in our state. We do have several domestic insurance companies that offer products here, but we also have a lot of national carriers as well. We participate in the Vermont market. So you mentioned Union Mutual, we have Vermont Mutual, but we also have Travelers, Progressive, Geico, who are all pretty competitive in that state and offering products. So we haven't seen the same issues of insurers pulling out of our market. Is that kind of what your question is? We're not seeing.
Well, that's the one side for like, what is state policy, but also for individuals in, the expense going up. So it sounds like to me that there's a base here, a foundation here of strength.
Correct.
And that, but like the weather could change.
Yeah, it's a competitive marketplace and I think, we foresee we'll still have lots of insurance companies to offer products. The fact being that because of the events and the national events, the prices are going up. And so the competitiveness is that, you could have a domestic or one of the national companies doing business here, offering products to consumers, and the cost will likely be the same from one to the other. It's many factors. It's weather events, it's inflation, inflationary pressures on insurance companies that are rising costs.
Just to go further, we do monitor companies who are withdrawing from the market. We have a checklist. We ask questions: why are you leaving? What are you doing? What is impacting your decision? So we do keep an eye on that to make sure that if that started happening in our state, we would know about it and be able to figure out what to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Okay, let's continue.
All right. Let's see, the banking division. Yes.
Oh, John, I'm sorry.
Sure.
John. Thank
Just
you.
real quick, so as you're monitoring, insurance and who's here, who's maybe leaving, maybe others coming in to provide products here for us. This increases over time here with premiums. Is there some range that you're seeing with increases, premiums across all of what's happening here in the state insurance wise?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the line of business.
Clearly we're seeing things in the health area here.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
That's a clear one here.
Yep. Do you want to speak to
Yeah, so we
the
actually have that
percentage?
data, we track it, I believe on a quarterly basis. So, insurers don't come in every month and have a rate increase, a lot of times it might be once a year, every 6 months. But we do track that, and we have data that I can provide that shows kind of where we're seeing rate increases go. We actually have seen some decreases, come in, which was great.
Workers' comp?
Which kind of indicated that at least, for some markets that they're seeing, inflation had slowed down. Severity, frequency, there's kind of factors that go into, how a company determines what rate they need to have. But we have seen a slowing of not only rate filings, but the rate requests that we're seeing. And then also some decreases, so I'd be happy to provide that data, if you're
Good news.
interested. Yeah,
It is
it
good
is very
news.
good news.
Thank you for that.
Okay, banking.
Yes, the banking division, and again, Deputy Commissioner Ferentz is attending virtually, but just an overview of the banking division is to ensure the safety, soundness, and stability of Vermont's banks, credit unions, trust companies, and other licensees while encouraging market competitiveness and availability of the financial services sector across Vermont. So these are some of the highlights and shows the statistics of the number of entities that are regulated by our banking division. And I'll take any questions if you.
We had any banking complaints at the moment, so we'll move on.
A lot of hot things going on in insurance right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely.
Our securities division is oversees the investment community and protects investors from fraud. They do a lot of outreach in terms of scams and fraud and educating Vermonters across the country or across the state, I should say. So it's and also promoting the development and growth of Vermont's capital markets. So again, here are some statistics and highlights, which I think shows you that for a division of 9 employees, they're busy folks. And they do a lot of outreach again, which we think has a tremendous impact to Vermonters.
So I noticed that protecting investors from fraud. Do you work with the AG's office? I mean, we often hear a lot about scams and the Consumer Protection Bureau has been decimated in Washington, so.
Yes, there is
Up to
interaction.
The AG's office, right?
Yes, on a number of matters, not only just, with frauds and securities issues, but, we may cross over in other divisions and in engaging with the AGO. Thank you for that question. And then near and dear to my heart is the captive insurance division. We license and monitor captive insurance companies domiciled here. We are the #1 domicile in the world at the moment, and it was a commitment over 44 years since the Special Insurer Act was passed in 1981. And so we are maintaining a regulatory system, much like the insurance division does, that attracts quality business to Vermont, promotes the reputation of the captive insurance industry worldwide, and ensures the solvency. So we have solvency measures and we conduct analysis and examinations for our regulated entities. We bring in over 33 million into the general fund in terms of premium taxes, and then we have fees for examinations and licensing fees and registration fees for our regulated entities. In our conversation earlier about the challenging commercial insurance market and this is not insurance, captive insurance is not insurance for consumers. It is insurance for businesses and organizations, just to be clear. And when we talk about a challenging commercial insurance market, it makes captive insurance more attractive for businesses and organizations. And so we often get phone calls about the rising costs of coverage for no greater risk, I should say, for an organization. They may not have had claims in 20 years, but their costs are going up. And so it makes captive insurance proposition a little bit more valuable. So we have been growing 41 new companies, just last year. We licensed 8 at the beginning of this year, and we already have 6 new applications that we took in over the past 2 weeks. So, worldwide, but in particular, the pressures and the inflationary pressures on businesses is causing this growth. So, moving on to the next slide, I had mentioned earlier that we are accredited, and not only, by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, but there are other national organizations that DFR uphold standards for. And it's important because it does give the public confidence in our regulation, and we uphold a particular standard through these accreditation programs. So I wanted to quickly mention that. And a lot of the times, these accreditation programs requires our employees to have certain credentials and ongoing training criteria that we have to meet. And so we are the regulatory for the financial expertise here.
So are you up for all of these in 2026?
I would have to defer to Aaron and Amanda, but we are up for NAIC accreditation, both on the insurance and captive insurance side of the house. This year, it'll be our 5-year accreditation, and we did a pre-review last year, which looked very positive, so.
That's good.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And then moving on to slide 12, this is where we get into the budget development a little bit more. And, there were, I guess, some of the things that I'll just point out and then take questions. There's approximately 6 vacancies at any point in time. So we're giving credit for that, for vacancy savings, which is about 6.8%. In prior years, we did show this by division. So the presentation may look a little inconsistent, but there's, again, with the general fund and having the revenue, we're able to request budget adjustments as we need to.
So I think we know the salaries and benefits, and they are what they are, and you talked about that. I'm looking at, I don't know what page this is, the insurance section, and I see other personal services of 414. There's a pharmacy benefit that.
Yes.
Maybe that would be something to let us know about.
Sure. So I do not have the law on the tip of my tongue, but we passed a law last year, Act 127. Thank you. I had 137 on the mind because that's our omnibus bill this year. So there was a law passed in last year to regulate pharmacy benefit managers, and we feel that is, I guess, increasing and improving our regulation over these entities. And so that has created the need for positions. So there are 3 positions budgeted here to help with regulating those entities and making sure that they're complying with the law that was passed.
So in your other chart, you said no new positions, and here's 3 positions. So I'm a little confused.
Yeah, these were positions that were, well, do you want to explain?
So they were approved in, say, fiscal year 25, but not added to our base. And they weren't, the positions weren't created in HR in time for the salaries for them to be caught up in salaries.
Okay, so that's why.
So they just show on
And next year it'll be up.
Yeah,
Is there anything
and it'll just
you
be
wanna-
absorbed.
Yeah, I just want to add that we do expect, so all PBMs will be subject to a pretty hefty licensing fee,
Yeah.
which we expect to fully fund those positions. So I
Great.
just wanted to.
Yeah, I know that's
Thank you for clarifying, yeah.
that's helpful, and it's a challenging area, and it's costing consumers a ton of money on prescriptions and things, so we're glad that you're.
And we are a handful of states that have implemented these laws, so.
And I
Very good for
read about more coming online that are looking at this, so that's an issue.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
it does stick out a little bit, but it's,
It does.
it's been in the works, and I signed off on the job specs just weeks ago, so they're in recruitment.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if any of the members had an opportunity to go into the performance link. I briefly checked it, though. It's really impressive
Is it?
and robust. Yeah, you can get lost in there, though. You can
Yes.
keep
Yeah.
going and never come back up. But it is really, you've done a great job with that.
Thank you. And I actually will say, we had a point person that has been working on this for 4 years. And it's not her day-to-day job, and she took it on, and I have to give her a lot of credit for pulling together the pieces from all the divisions and actually working even harder to improve our PPMB from prior years. And so what you're seeing is the most improved version, and I think we'll just continue, it'll
Yeah.
continue to get better.
Great.
And it, again, it's aiding in the transparency. There are so many opportunities that I have had to encounter with people, and they're like, what does DFR do? And I think,
Here, let me show you that.
yeah, the PPMB, I think, is starting to provide more transparency in all of the activities and how we measure our success.
Mhm.
You saw our highlight slides, and then there's an appendix at the end of this budget document that, we set goals, but the PPMB kind of pulls those three sort of things together, our goals and how we measure success, the PPMB, and then our budget, and what the value that we give to Vermont and through the
That's
general fund.
Standard for other departments. Correct?
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, Dave, does that seem like something that other departments ought to be encouraged to have similar kind of, that we benefit from?
Asking that, Dave, or me? No.
No, you.
There's
I
encouragement.
think so.
Yes.
Just
It's a good idea.
impressive.
All right.
Secretary of Administration Clark is
Did you-
doing a good job. Her staff is encouraging, and through the Office of Continuous Improvement, they're very encouraging to all the departments to
And,
take this on.
Oh, good. So you can be the role models for how to do it.
and good luck with your office move. Sure, that'll be
Thank
fun.
you. I think it'll be well improved. Yeah.
Were there any other big items in here? Nothing's looking big in the budget.
No, it's,
Okay.
it's pretty flat, I would say.
Great. Any other questions for DFR folks? If not, it's good. Thank you very much for coming
Thank you.
in and for all the work you're doing to protect us and help us out and.
And right back to you for all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, great. All right. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Committee, it's lunchtime. And we're starting back up at 1:00 with the E911 board. I may be at a meeting, but Tip will have the run of show there at 1. And then at 1:30, we have Office of Child Abuse and Family Advocate. The Advocate General is coming in at 2:00. And that'll be our last for the day. So enjoy your lunch and we'll